Yeah, he even chimed in. Everyone seems to be on this at the moment. Jack, I wouldn't say he probably didn't delete Ross's comments. YouTube and comments is weird, just to be very clear. I have people all the fucking time in my comment section saying I can literally read their comment, and then I have another comment from them saying, "Why did you delete my comment?" And I'm like, dude, I can read your comments. I can see all of the comments that you just wrote. The problem is YouTube doesn't always show all of the comments, so I don't know what comment Lewis Rossmann left, but I highly doubt that the Thor would just delete the comments. That would be super sus. Okay, let's see what Ross has to say here. I tend to like Lewis Ross, so I know Lewis Ross is, for those of you that don't know who Lewis Ross is, he's basically been at hearings, government hearings, about the Apple stuff. He's very big on consumer protections and how consumer protections are handled. He hates companies that take sort of the shortcut in this. So I would like to hear what Lewis Ross has to say. I don't know if he is at all a gamer or knows much about the gaming space, but, still, 100% did. There are screenshots, and he shadowbanned Ross from commenting again. Do we have actual evidence of that, though?
Hey, everybody.
I would also say, I mean, if we go to his video here, man, there's so many comments. I would be surprised if he actually. There's 5,918 comments. I don't know. I don't know. Does some weird things with comments a lot. How are you going to sort that? No, there are ways that you can do it. There are ways that you can do it, but I don't. The only time I have ever deleted comments is when people make clear racist comments. Then I'll delete it if I see it. I don't always see those comments because I'm not going to keep checking videos for months after, right? I'll usually check a day or two and then I'm done. Transition comments from people like Narrator Way and the Frontman Rocker. Yeah, I'm not going to go through 5,000. Here's Narrator Way. So I see him here. Jack. Narrator Way. What's the other guy you said? The Frontman Rocker. There you go. Reddit comments. The public was saying that they disagree. So you were saying I'm wrong, but actually I had hundreds of messages that support me. Sounds like gaslighting from the start to make people side with you a bit easier. I'm not attacking you right now. I'm pointing out what feels disingenuous to me. Also interesting to see who these devs are and how many of them are corporate cockwheels and just people who'd agree with you. Okay, so the Frontman Rocker isn't providing any evidence here of the comments being deleted. He's just, and I would say, if he was going to delete Lewis Ross's comments, why wouldn't he delete the Frontman Rocker's comments? Because this guy is clearly calling him out for bullshit. Why isn't he deleting this? If he's just deleting bad comments from the video, it makes sense that he would delete all of the bad comments, right? Fight the argument I'm presenting. The argument you presented was that you were not willing to engage in the initiative in any capacity, including having it adjusted to answer your issues, because you didn't like how Ross advertises the political process. That is a comically ludicrous position, if weren't so badly disingenuous, but just to play developer's advocate. No, actually, that's not the argument he made, but never mind that. That is a misrepresentation of the argument that he made. People will sabotage live service games and then profit off the corpse. Ross has already told you in a comment you removed that this is not evidence of Ross's comment being removed. This is just this guy saying that Rossman's comment was removed. Or Ross's comment was removed. Ross has already told you in a comment you removed that the initiative is not intended to target games that sell a license, rather than a product, and your responding dismissal was half-assed and unconvincing. Ignoring that, this is still ridiculous on its face. The initiative requires a dead game be in a functional state, not content-rich or feature-full, and to be available for everyone who purchased the game. Anyone torpedoing a game to steal its lunch are going to find themselves monetizing a bare-bones skeleton of an X product that anyone else can alternatively provide for free. Okay, so first and foremost, his argument here is highly disingenuous, because even if Ross told him the initiative isn't meant to target, just date games, but is actually meant to target or licensed games, but is meant to target non-licensed games, that's not what Ross's initiative says. Ross's initiative states that it will cover all video games. So even if Ross says, "Oh, but I'm not talking about licensed video games," that's literally what Thor brought up in his first video. That was one of the biggest problems he had, was that you're being way too vague in what you're saying, right? You're just saying video games. So that would still be a problem, because the politicians are going to hear video games and then just going to start doing it. So that was one of his problems, was that it is badly worded. And you just saying, "Well, I didn't mean it that way," doesn't mean shit. What did you write? Change the wording if that's not what you mean, right? Playing the game, it doesn't make sense to preserve it. It's making sense for you to... it's not a requirement for it to not be a valid position. You don't get to dictate how someone else experiences a game. If no one's playing the game no more, it doesn't make sense to preserve it. Well, actually, no, of course it fucking does. Six, how you doing? Stream, before I head to work, I just wanted to say I liked your animatic breakdown, particularly addressing tropes and how tropes are often necessary for creating relatable stories. Now, time to hit the road. Thank you so much for hanging out. Really appreciate you. Take care of yourself. Thank you. And enjoy work. Six. Of course this matters. Like, if no one is playing your game, like if you have a server with game, like with where people are going to play the game, but no one is playing it, like, why would you have to keep that server going? 44 months, part of the DJ Nation. Appreciate you, fam. Thank you. Stene, how you doing, brother? Okay, so going through his comment here, I don't see how this speaks it, but I'm not going to say you're wrong, because he may have deleted it. He may have deleted it. I'm not sure, right? You understand? Elden Ring, gooders. Unbeatable Sheep, how you doing, bro? I could definitely not be one of those people that go get good. I'm still trying to do that. So we'll see. But okay, let's hear what Rossmann has to say.
How's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. I'm feeling really, really out of it over the past few weeks. I've just bitten off more than I can chew. So I'm going to be reading from notes as I do this video. I just didn't have it in me to like have all my points in my head like I usually do, to have that kind of stream of consciousness video. So today what I wanted to do is I wanted to follow up on the video I did on Ross Scott and the campaign to stop killing games. For those of you who are not familiar with it, I did a video about 6 months ago on Ubisoft. There was an executive at Ubisoft that said people should become comfortable not owning games. You probably imagine what I think about this, given my stances on right to repair and ownership. Anyway, moving on, the reason that this pissed a lot of people off is because Ubisoft was a perfect example of why this is a problem. There's a game called The Crew. This game is playable online when you connect to a server, but it also has a campaign mode and has single-player modes that are considerably usable. They're viable. There are people out there that like the single-player mode, and after Ubisoft decided to shut down the server, this single-player mode was no longer able to work. And this aggravated a lot of people that paid for the game. This game was not advertised as a service. There are games that are advertised as a service, but this was advertised.
Well, the game was advertised, just to be clear, as an online-only game. It was advertised from the beginning as being online, right? So, by its definition, online would be service. But I do agree with Rossmann. You didn't technically say that this would be a live service game. So, therefore, you should potentially be held accountable for this. And I fully agree with what Rossmann is saying here. And I said in my first response to Thor's first video, I do think that if the game has the ability to be played offline, it must be playable offline. And if you want to take the game offline because the servers are too expensive or whatever the case may be, then do that, but then keep the game in an offline state if you can. I've never played the crew, so I have no fucking idea whether or not the campaign is online or offline. I genuinely don't know. I'm going to believe Rossmann. He's never lied to me before, so I'll believe him and say, if there is a campaign that can be played offline, why the hell would you remove that?
As a game that you purchased, that you bought and paid for. And again, the meaning of the word purchase in America used to mean something with regards to ownership. If I bought a game and I have a copy of the game, you know, I kind of figure like I can keep playing that game in single player mode without having to connect to your server. So this pissed a lot of people off, including Mr. Ross Scott, who decided to try and push an initiative called Stop Killing Games. And you can read about that over here. You can read all the specifics of it. This is an EU initiative here. This is not a bill. This is not even a draft bill or a law. This is the EU's version of, we've written down something on a napkin for consideration. Let's see if we can turn it into something later. Now, there's a person who really dug into this with a lot of criticism, and he's quite popular on YouTube. Mr. Pirate Software over here. His name is Thor. And from 10 hours and 24 minutes to 10 hours and 41 minutes in this particular video, he goes over everything that he believes is functionally wrong and useless with this campaign from the perspective of a video game developer. And a lot of people have been just shitting on him in the comments relentlessly, and I've had a lot of people email me shitting on him as well, and I don't think that that's really appropriate. I want to explain why. There was a class that I took recently where he had to go over some literature and some kind of poems and stuff like that. And I chose this one poem by Emmanuel Xavier. The work that I discussed really didn't consider any of the reasons that these problems occur. They didn't consider any of the shades of gray, any of the reasons that people may come to these decisions. It's just like, you either agree with this or you're unreasonable. And I don't really like that. It's one thing to be bombastic when you're discussing something that aggravates you, like I am in these videos. But when you are talking about legislation, you really do need to dig into the details, and you have to understand why things are the way they are before you try to go about changing the world. And when I'm discussing legislation about whether it's John Deere or wheelchair stuff or right to repair in my field, I really do try to engage with the other party and try to figure out what their concerns are. What bothers me when it comes to stuff like Apple is they won't tell me what their real concerns are. They have this copy-pasted nonsense from lobbyists that is just, in my opinion, made up bullshit. But here you're actually hearing the criticisms from the perspective of a video game developer that's, whether you like it or not, is actually trying to engage in good faith. So just randomly shitting on this guy, I really think that that's a crappy thing to do, and I don't think it's appropriate. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to try and go through his criticism.
Okay, but Lewis, this is the internet. Randomly shitting on people is what we do here. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't care about that. I want to be able to tell someone to unalive themselves or to, eat dicks because they have an opinion that does not align 100% with mine, and I should be allowed to do that. This is the internet. Yeah, it is disgusting. The fact that people can get this angry over, like, what I find funny is, in one sentence, people will say, dude, this is just an initiative. This isn't a bill. This isn't a law. This is just an initiative. It barely fucking matters. But then in the next sentence, they'll get super fucking angry because some of us are saying, I don't know. This initiative sounds like it's going to do the wrong things. How dare you? It's like, wait, either this thing matters a lot or it doesn't matter at all. But it can't, like, both of these things cannot be true at the same time. Does it matter a lot or does it not matter at all?
Criticisms, give some of my opinion on it, try to figure out how this could manifest in the real world, and then just go over some of my thoughts on it. So if I'm understanding it right, and feel free to correct me if I'm not, Mr. Thor, he believes that the initiative is too vague and it needs to be specific to single player games that don't require a server for support. He's arguing that this would burden video game developers, so you would have to design games with this initiative in mind, that they are going to have to be playable even when the manufacturer, I'm so used to dealing with right to repair, when the publisher and developers turn off the server. The third is that there's some code that cannot be provided to customers because you can have licensing agreements on particular code where it's only available to the game developer, but they're not licensing the ability to give it to you.
Yeah.
It feels that he feels that politicians don't understand video gaming and they're going to mess it up, and yeah, I understand.
To be fair, politicians don't understand video games, and they will mess it up. Show me one thing politicians have ever gotten involved in where they have actually made the thing better. Politicians don't make things better. They make things significantly worse. At best, politicians can make things worse slower or faster, depending on how much they don't know about the topic. But they never make things better.
understand that one. Whether it's politicians or industry lobbyists, they are kind of clueless, and I'll give you some examples later. And he states that retroactively applying this to all games would be a disaster. The law should not be retroactive. This is reasonable. To just completely shit on this guy, in my opinion, is not the way to get things done. You're also not going to get buy-in from people in the industry. And even if people in the industry don't particularly agree with you, you would rather at least kind of try and meet them in some way where instead they'll say, listen, I don't like this, versus I will dedicate my life to ensuring that this doesn't pass. Initiatives, they're not draft bills. So in the United States, like we'll have an idea, you'll have a draft bill. With right to repair, there are bills from 2015 that were not passed until 2022 or 2023. There's literally 6 to 8 years of amendments that will go on before anything is passed. And that often requires input from all of the parties that will be affected by it. This over here is not even a draft bill. This is an initiative. So this is like going to McDonald's and I don't have a pen. I'm going to use ketchup on a napkin to draft out an idea. So I can understand why somebody would be concerned, but it's essentially written on a napkin. A lot of this stuff is stuff that will be changed with time. Even if the stakeholders of this don't want it changed, it's going to get changed with time. This is...
Yeah, but what I would have a problem with there, and what Rossmann is saying here, I cannot in good faith get involved with something of which the wording as is currently written, I do not agree with. Like, you can't tell me I should be okay with an initiative when the very wording of the initiative makes me uncomfortable, and then go, but remember, this is going to change. It's obviously not going to be this way. And then I just, well, how about we just change it now to what it needs to be so that we don't have to worry about it in the future? Because if it doesn't change into the future, we're fucked as a result of this. So I would like to see it changed now to something that is a lot more palatable and something that doesn't allow for basically just a sledgehammer to be taken to the gaming industry. And then I would absolutely get behind it. So I am all for an initiative to get publishers to stop being dickheads, right? I'm all for that. But how you're going to word that initiative is going to determine whether or not I'm going to get involved in it. And the current wording of the initiative as it stands, I don't even feel comfortable with. And I'm not a developer of video games. I don't have my own video game company. I don't make my own video games. I'm a gamer that hates most of the gaming industry. And I don't even feel comfortable with it because the wording is incredibly vague. And I don't like vague wording, especially with stuff like this, and especially with politicians.
Written on a napkin. There's no real genuine legalese here. He does quote from different articles, and we're going to go over some of those articles later. But again, this is not a law. Secondly, this initiative is not going to require games to be updated retroactively. When a right to repair bill passes, they don't have to go back through all their hardware from 1990 through 2023 and make parts and schematics and diagrams available, because that would be fairly unreasonable. What it usually means is not only does it not apply retroactively, it also applies in the future. So a bill that's passed in 2022 may say in it, this does not apply to anything created before May of 2024. So not only are they not going to require that this particular piece of legislation apply retroactively to everything, it also usually doesn't even apply until a date far into the future. The EU may do things a little bit differently, but from what I've seen, they have a date into the future, even in the EU, as to when it is they are going to apply. So I could completely understand a video game developer saying, do I really have to go back and patch code from 2004 for this? The amount of resources that may take a smaller studio or a smaller developer, that really is the type of thing that would be burdensome on them. It would be burdensome on a large company, but they pay for it, whereas a small company, I can imagine them going bankrupt over it. That's not going to apply in that case. Now, when it comes to live service gaming, there is this thing with advertising. If you're advertising a game as $5 a month, you are paying for this game as a service. You're paying $5 a month for the game. It runs on our server. We can shut this down at a given point in time, and once we shut it down, we will no longer charge you money. That's an honest transaction right there. And even if I don't like that model very much, I can respect the truth in advertising that exists here. The problem that I have is with a different type of live service game, where it is not sold as a live service game. It is sold as a game that you purchase. Something like The Crew, from what I see, and to be clear, I'm kind of ignorant here because I'm not really into the whole live service game thing. It doesn't look like this was sold as a live service game. It was sold in a manner where I, as a consumer who's not really hyper into the modern gaming community, would imagine that what I was purchasing was a game that I can continue to play single player without ever having to think about Ubisoft shutting down something into the future. If I bought that game, I would expect that I could continue playing it. So for me, it's not even necessarily
Well, let's see. The Crew was a 2014 online only racing video game. Co-developer. All right, so that right there, online only, suggests, at least in part, that this would be a live service game because it is online only. Now, as I said before, I do have a problem with the vague messaging around that. I think publishers, if there's one initiative that I would be happy to get behind, it would be an initiative that forces publishers to be very upfront about what exactly am I purchasing, how am I purchasing it, and for how long am I allowed to purchase that thing. That should be common knowledge, not hidden in some TOS somewhere that no one ever fucking reads. It should be right there, front page. This is what you're paying for. This is what you get. And then that's done, right? Online only can mean so many fucking things. Live service is inferred, but I don't think if I'm going to purchase something, I should be purchasing it based on inferences. The same argument I made with the initiative being vaguely worded, and you can't get me to back a project that I don't agree with now in the hopes that it will be fixed into the future, because you're asking me to infer that things will be fixed in the future. I don't want to do that there. I also don't want to be doing it when I'm purchasing video games. Curious if what this would open up for things outside of the video game industry, no longer being accessible, customers paid for. Even I have no idea. But what I will say is the conversation around this is so much larger, I think, than what anyone is even fucking imagining. So we're talking about not just the servers, right? The servers is one thing. Keeping the servers active and running is already very, very expensive. Servers are not cheap. They're not free, right? They cost money. More importantly, you're talking about licensing that we've discussed in the first video. Licensing costs money, and any game that you make will have some licensing unless you design everything from the ground up, which of course they didn't do in the Crew. Rakanzador, how you doing, bro? Thanks for the follow. Really appreciate you. Welcome to the channel. Thank you. So you have licensing that needs to be paid for. If that game runs for 10 years and the licensing is for 10 years, if you're forced to keep this game alive and running for eternity or ad infinitum, this suddenly means that licensing is going to get a lot more expensive. The initiative does not account for that. So I don't know. It feels like a lot of people aren't discussing all of the issues. It's like copyright issues. There's so much, as a YouTuber, I can tell you, copyright is the bane of my existence. And it's specifically because of this kind of bullshit.
Necessarily about single player versus multiplayer. It's about how it was sold. If you sold the game as a purchase, that's different than you selling a rent leased service where it's $5 a month. I know at the end of the month I have to pay. If I don't pay at the end of the month, I don't get the game. And if you shut down the server, which you're allowed to do at any given time, I will not be billed anymore. There's a difference in the honesty there. And I think a lot of the problem that consumers have is not necessarily the concept of live service games versus games that are fully local. I think the problem that a lot of consumers have is the complete lack of honesty in the way that this is sold, which is something that it does need to be addressed. When it comes to licensing agreement, there's certain software that Thor mentioned that he may not even have a license to allow you to have. The license that he gets from whoever he's getting the code from or the rights, I told you guys I was out of it. The rights to the trademarks for. This may be a license that he has as a dev, or he has, but he can't give that to you. So again, I'm just going to pull an example out of my ass here. Let's say you have a racing game. I don't know, like something like The Crew. I'm not saying that this game is done this way. I'm just trying to give you a hypothetical analogy. Let's say you have a game like this, and let's say that the physics for the car drive.
Apocalypse, this is literally what Louis Rossmann is discussing here. And this isn't even something that I thought about, but this is the point, right? So take, for example, BMW. We discussed this in The Crew. By saying, well, it should be freeware once it reaches end of life, just because I owned the game, I made the game, and you now own the crew, BMW owns the rights to the cars being used in the game. That's why I purchased a license from them. That does not mean that I now have the right to pass those licenses on to other people. So if that game goes freeware, so it becomes free, you could imagine companies like BMW or Toyota going, the fuck are you talking about? We did not offer you a license so that you can use our car or that you can give our car licenses away to other people. And again, if you're thinking to yourself, why would this matter? Once the game goes freeware, the code of the game becomes available for everyone to see and for everyone to play around with. So what happens if you have the crew now being freeware, and some fuck decides to go screw around with the code and basically takes a BMW and dresses it up in Nazi signs and drives around in his new Nazi vehicle, with the BMW sign on it? BMW will obviously not be okay with this. They will obviously be like, what the fuck are you doing? We didn't sign up for this. This is not something that we endorsed, nor did we give you the rights to this. So it creates problems that will need to be fixed. We will need to talk about this, right? It's easily solved. Stop letting companies advertising games. Apocalypse, I would be okay with that too. But this isn't advertising in games. This is licensing. So when it comes to car games, I know my cousin, for example, is huge on, what's that fucking Gran Turismo bullshit? I don't know if you guys remember that. But the Gran Turismo stuff, the reason he loved that game, and he literally bought the steering wheel and the whole thing for that game, was because you get to drive Porsches and BMWs and all the rest of it in those games. And of course, if you're going to buy, or if you're going to, buy car games, people tend to buy car games because they care about cars. No one is going to want to drive the BMS that kind of looks like the BMW, but they didn't pay for the, license, so now it's the BMS. No one's going to do that. They want to drive the actual car.
Driving was not developed by Ubisoft. They got that code from somewhere else. That code may be code that they have a license to use for a certain period of time, but that may be code that they're not allowed to give you a license for permanently. So let's say they have a license for have that code for about 5 years. And let's also apply to something like a logo in a car. Let's say they have a Ferrari in there and they have a specific car, but they have to license the ability to have that within their game, to use their trademarks. That license may be for 5 years. Now, if that license ends, if they stop paying after 5 years, that means that you can't have access to it either, because they only paid for a temporary license. But you have that game which you purchased, which means they need a way to disable access to you. Now, the problem that I would have in that case is that they should advertise that this game is not going to work in 5 years because of a license that we have on the code, or a license that we have on the logos, a license we have on the material in that game. That's never really put out there. Now, one of the arguments to be made here is that the manufacturer of the game, the developer of the game, may want to renew that license after 5 years if the game is still doing well. So if the game is not doing well, they shut off the server. But if the game is selling like hotcakes, they may decide that they want to renew that license. So they don't really want to pigeonhole themselves into a box by putting in the advertising materials, this game will not.
Yeah, but wouldn't, that should be easily solvable by simply putting a disclaimer that the game or the license may be revoked after 5 years at the discretion of the company. There's plenty of TOs like that. Rent contracts, for example, work exactly like this. The rent contract may be extended at the discretion of the owner of the house or of the business. So I think you can get around that pretty easily, unless it's something I'm not keeping in mind here. Keep in mind, I'm from South Africa, so I know the South African laws on this pretty well. Not the EU ones.
Not work on this date in 2028. Because if the game is still selling, they may want to continue having it work. And I understand that idea that the manufacturer wants to have that freedom into the future. However, so do the people who bought the fucking game. If I bought this game, I don't really care about your licensing agreements for the code. I don't care about your licensing agreements for any of this stuff, because back in the day, we didn't have to care. When you bought a game like Gran Turismo 2 on your PlayStation 1, you didn't have to worry about any of this. And there was no worry about licensing. All the cars in that game, a lot of them were real cars. Whatever licensing they worked out with any of the manufacturers of those cars, whatever license it was a license where
Yeah, but this is exactly the point. This is why I said this needs to become a much larger conversation than just video games need to be perpetual. Why the hell did we get Gran Turismo on the PlayStation 2 that was offline and eternal? You can still go back and play that. Why is that no longer a thing why has licensing agreements now become this new way for companies to make bank pretty much every 10 years? This is something that needs to be discussed, right? And I'm almost willing to bet you the reason this has become such a big thing is because of the gaming industry and their constant push for online live service video games, where the the car companies and all these other companies that license it has started to realize, wait. If you're going to continuously making money off of your game, then we want to continuously make money off of our license. And if you just did a game, like nowadays, it wouldn't even fly. If you went to BMW and you said, hey, I want to buy the licensing agreement for your game that's going to be, for my game that's going to be completely offline and eternal, they'll probably be like, no. No, because we're going to charge you every 10 years for the licensing fees or else get fucked. And then what are you going to do, right? This is what's happening in the music industry. I told you guys about Metal Gear Solid that had to be taken off of Steam. And the reason it had to be taken off of Steam is because of copyright music. Copyright. Now we're talking about games that's 20 years or older, and the music industry has the power to take these games off of Steam because of copyright songs in the games that have been in the games from the beginning. Dude, the internet changed the world, except for all the places that it didn't. In all these places where no changes have been made whatsoever. And it's just like, oh my fuck, man. Installation, always online means always readable. They won't get rid of that access. Problems become more apparent the more conditions are pushed that make those problems occur to begin with. The game industry just turns as slow as a charging mammoth.
I could continue to play Gran Turismo 2 today in my PlayStation 1. Either A, the code they use for the physics, I don't know what they did. Either A, they bought a right to use the code and to have a lifetime ability to use that code in that particular game. Or B, they wrote the code for that themselves. Whatever it is, somehow, some way, back in the day, this was not an issue. And if the issue right now is that the licensing agreements for code or the licensing agreements for trademark, copyright, anything going into the game are such that you literally have to disable the game, even if it is capable of being run locally in single player mode, a law like this would throw a wrench into the works, yet I would argue that that's a wrench that needs to be thrown at some point in time. Because if the people licensing this code or if the people licensing these trademarks are doing it in such a way that they're literally handcuffing the developers to the point where they couldn't even give you a server binary if you wanted it, that's a serious problem. Because this is something that I've really thought about for a while. You know, why not just give the users the server binary? Well, they may literally not legally be allowed. The developers may be handcuffed as a result of their arrangements with the people that they license the code, or the trademarks, or the copyright for whatever's in the game from. And if that's the case, if a law like this were passed, I imagine that would be kind of I hope, to be clear, I'm not going to say it would be, I hope that would be a negotiating stick for the developers and the publishers to say to the people that they're licensing the stuff from, hey man, these licensing agreements don't work anymore. I can't sell my game to hundreds of millions of people. I can't even offer this to them if you're going to do this. And at that point, I imagine that it would result in some sort of different negotiating style.
I agree with
now,
this.
Let's
100%.
go down the whole rabbit hole of server binaries. One of the things that I would think, as somebody who's ignorant of all this, is if the game requires a server to run, why not just give them an exe? I would think you should just give me the exe for the server binary. If it runs on Spark, if it runs on a Pentium 1, if it runs on some random shit that you made, whatever it is, you would technically be in compliance with the law as long as you provided a server binary that allows somebody to spin up a server in their house. All you would have to modify in the game, in this this hypothetical case, I imagine, would be have a little fill-in box where you would change the address of the server that was hard-coded into the game with the address of your server. What this does not take into account, which is very important, is that most modern infrastructure it's going to connect to buckets somewhere else. It's going to connect to containers and storage and databases that are somewhere else. So even if you were to give somebody the executable of the server, it wouldn't necessarily work because the game developer or the game publisher is still paying AWS. They're still paying for this bucket. They're still paying for this storage. They're still paying for this Snowflake database or whatever the hell else they're using. To be clear, I'm not a game developer, but you get the point here. Even if you give somebody the...
You know what all of this sounds like? It sounds like we should get back to making offline video games and stop fucking around with all these online-only bullshit, because it sounds like the online-only bullshit is just getting stupid. At this point, is basically talking about what I've been on about. I agree with this part. I agree. Thus far, all I've paused for was to provide clearance or clarity on what Rossmann is saying. I have agreed thus far with everything Rossmann is saying. Even if I may have a different way of getting there, I want the same things. I do think we need to have a conversation about this. And I think unless we have that conversation, things are just going to continue to deteriorate.
Server binary, the way that they developed the game, they did not develop that server in a way where they could just hand it off to you. They didn't develop this using that 1990s concept of everything being local, or even the concept from 10 years ago of how cloud worked, where you're just using stuff on another computer. You may have a server.
And before people go, but why can't they just make it, back to the 90s, back to the old days where everything is local? I don't know how many of you remember World of Warcraft patches back in the day, but back in the day, if you wanted a hotfix in World of Warcraft, you would have to wait until Wednesday. That, of course, is if it was at least not too big of a hotfix. And the reason you would have to wait for the hotfixes to happen on a Wednesday would be because everything was local. So you would need to download a patch in order to get all of those things updated so that it would actually work. Not everything was local. A lot of things were on the server, but it was hard-coded into it. So it couldn't be done server-side. Nowadays, most of your hotfixes are done server-side. They fix it while you're in the game, right? While you're playing, they're making fixes, and sometimes it crashes the servers, but for the most part, the servers don't even notice, or you as the player don't even notice that those changes are happening. Back in the day, that was not an option. You wanted to make giant changes to certain spells or how abilities operate? Yeah, you're going to have to wait for a massive downtime where the fucking servers go down for 9 hours while everything is being updated, and then you have a massive patch that you're downloading because the patch is updating the game files, because most of those things are hosted in the game files, and it's that needs to be updated. So there's pros and cons. If we do go back to localizing everything, you're going to have to remember that hotfix is something of the past. It's a proper server fix, a proper localized fix, and those things take a lot of time to do. So that means if on that week the raid is busted and broken, tough. Wait for next week, and next week maybe you can play.
That is connecting to 10 or 15 different computers in order to allow that game to work. And those 10 or 15 different computers that this one server is connecting to are all servers that have subscriptions for it. You're paying for AWS subscription. You're paying for storage in this particular place, storage that is scalable over time in the way that S3 buckets at Amazon are scalable. They're paying for that. So to give somebody an EXE would be difficult. This would require that they rethink the entire concept of how the server is put together, which would be a serious problem if we are talking about games that came out 5 or 10 years ago. This would not be as easy as just giving somebody an EXE, depending on how the game was developed.
Yeah.
If going forward they knew that they had this requirement, then the game may be developed differently. And he makes a good point here, which is you would have to rethink how you develop the game in order to be in compliance with this, and that could cause...
Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. Because if something like this were to pass, and it passes in the way that I want it to pass, and the way that I think most of you want it to pass, the one good thing that comes out of this is all of these fucking scumbag live service companies instantly stop doing the live service bullshit and start making single-player games, because they don't want to deal with the bullshit of not making single-player games single-player offline games. That's the one good thing that comes out of this. No longer do we have a single-player game that requires an internet connection.
Extra work. That would mean thinking about how to create this for local infrastructure, as well as creating it for if you're connecting to 5, 10 or different servers somewhere else. This would require one of two things. Behind door number one, you would provide the code open source and say, here you go, have fun. Set up your own S3 bucket, set up your own AWS, set up your own Microsoft Azure, set up your own Snowflake shit. We gave you the source code. Have fun. Or let's say you don't want to open source your game. You have no desire to open source your game. You want to keep it closed source. I understand that. You would have to design the server in a way where there's a local mode, maybe some sort of thing in Docker like what Image does or what Freegate does or what Mailcow does. You would have to create some sort of local system like that and then have your system, which is designed to be scalable. And this would mean designing with that in mind. Now, if this was a law that applied retroactively, I would say that this is completely unfair because that's a lot of freaking work to do for the past 10 years of shit. Being a law that may go into effect in 2026, 2027, 2028, I'm okay with it. Does it make things harder? Yes. If that's what's necessary to bring back ownership, I do think that that's worth it. It's not as...
I know I'm being like nitpicky here, but I would say 2026, 2027, 2028, too quick. It's too fast. Video games can take 4 or 5 years to develop. So this means that games that's coming out in 2026 could already be in 2 years worth of development. So if the law came out and said, oh, it's only going to apply in 2026, that means that you might have a shit ton of games right now that basically has to start over with all of their development. So it would I would say 2028 at the earliest, if you're going to, future date the fixes. 2028 would probably be the earliest that you can okay that. Why are games taking so long to develop now compared to 20 years ago? Reckon a couple of reasons. Number one, games have just gotten much bigger than they were 20 years ago, at least most games, or some games at least. But then also just the teams that's working on games have become much larger. The scope of games have become much wider, and they're a hell of a lot more complex, right? I remember playing Duke Nukem way back in the day, and the gun basically just went pew-pew, right? You went through the levels, and the gun went pew-pew. Nowadays, you have things like travel time, bullet drop, wind directions that can influence bullets and the way bullets travel. So games have become infinitely more complex than what they are today. And all of those things have to be dialed in before you make the game public. Otherwise, it's going to feel terrible to play. No, Pong would obviously not be made. Although, based on modern day publishers, like if you get a modern day publisher or modern day developer to make Pong, $4 years, $250 million budget, and over 10,000 developers. And then they cancel the project at the end because they just couldn't find the fun in the game based on modern day developers.
As much an issue with understanding, it's an ideological difference as to whether or not this should get pushed through. And I understand the game developer's perspective, which is I want to develop my game the way I want to develop my game. But I also understand the consumer's perspective, which is you use the word purchase here. You did not use the word service game that expires at this particular time. The instruction manual does not say if I don't pay $5 a month after this date, it won't work. The manual nor the box say that this game is going to turn off in 7 years. I want to keep playing my game. I understand that. So then it becomes an issue of which one of these is more important. And in my opinion, the one that leans a little bit more towards ownership is the one that matters. Providing support to people when they're running their own server. Even if you open source the server, even if you did that,
with this.
You know, if you've been in a customer service-based business, that you are going to get a bunch of people bothering you. I have people that will email me asking questions on how to fix their own shit. After I've made 1,000 YouTube videos, I have instructional guides on my wiki that are 10 pages long. They will ask these questions and expect answers for free. And if I don't give answers to detailed questions for free, they will get mad at me. In other cases that I have people that will actually get mad at me because I don't fix things that I don't have the ability to fix because I cannot get parts anymore because they have not been available for 6 years. Somebody like this, who I'm not kidding, used to have the name Zeus the Mighty Oak, which was just, oh my God, that was hysterical, left me a 1-star review because I was not able to fix something. In my YouTube videos...
No, wait. I have a MacBook Pro, which these guys are completely capable of repairing based on the videos I have watched on their YouTube channel. However, because this machine has a particular reputation, they won't touch it. God forbid it should be my machine and my money to spend on it and my decision to make as far as my priority as to whether or not I need this machine back for my purposes as if I control my own life. Nope, sorry, your particular machine we can't guarantee. As if I'm asking you to, we won't touch. I was really excited to have them fix my machine and knew they could solve my problem, only to have them slam the door in my face. Bad business. When people throw money at you, it's best to find a way to take it. We're big people now, and we can take responsibility for our own actions. I don't need you to be my mommy. Except, of course, for all the legal reasons why a company can't just do it, because you might say, oh, but I don't hold you accountable until they fix it and it breaks, and then you sue the living fuck out of them, and now they are responsible because that's what the law says. Imagine Nike has a specific line of shoes available for 3 months in 2014, and they're for sale at Foot Locker. They stopped being made at the end of 2014. You come back to Foot Locker in 2020, become angry at the salesperson that the shoe from 2014 is not available in 2020. You berate the employee who tells you the shoe from 2014 is no longer made, and then wait until 12:30 a.m. to write a 1-star review of that Foot Locker. This is what it's like for me when someone points to a YouTube video that I did 6 years ago and asks why I can't do the repair I was able to do in 2014 with the parts available or not available, in this case in 2020. Man, if entitlement was a person, it would be this dude. Like, how am I supposed to fix your machine if the parts for your machine is no longer available? Like, what am I supposed to do for you? I remember a few years ago, a friend of mine wanted to buy a new car, and we went to the one of the garages that sells vehicles, and he saw this really nice car. It was like it's a nice car. It looks beautiful. It's a Chinese car. A Chinese model. I don't know what the fucking name is or the model, but it's a car. It looks really nice, and it's a Chinese vehicle. And he was like, how much is this? And the guy looked him dead in the eye, and he was like, I would not buy this if I were you. And he was like, why not? And he said, because the cars are cheap, the parts are near impossible to fucking find. So if it breaks, there is no guarantee that any of this can be fixed. So you're basically buying this in the hopes that there are parts available for it. I mean, this is something that happens, right? What are you supposed to do in that scenario?
Hysterical. Left me a 1-star review because I was not able to fix something. In my YouTube videos, this product was fixable in a video I did in 2014. The part stopped being available in decent condition 2015, arguably 2014, depending on who you're buying it from. 2015 passes, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We're talking about a device that was manufactured in 2011. If I could fix it because I could get parts, I would. But I couldn't. The parts in the market were 99% shit. They were parts where people were scratching off the old date codes and putting on new ones to pretend that they were new when they were not. They were parts that I knew were going to fail 2 months after I put them on the board, if they even worked. So rather than tell them, yeah, sure, take this service, I'll give you a 45-day warranty and it'll die on 3 months, I said, I'm not going to do that. And what did I get in return for it? 1-star review. Customers can be unreasonable. So I understand when he says, if I make this server available, if I say, okay, fine, here's your server, learn how to set up Docker on your own, have fun. Even though that would technically be complying with the law, he would have a bunch of customer service requests that would be a royal pain in the ass. You can create a canned response in Freshdesk or your email software or whatever the hell you're using to handle tickets saying, this game is no longer supported. We are happy to make the code available to you. We're not going to charge you for the code. We're going to give you all the stuff you need to set up a server. Here's all the internal documentation. Or if you open source it, here's the source code. I can't walk you through how to set up a server, bro. This game is 9 years old. Sorry. And there are going to be people that understand that and are reasonable. There are going to be people that never even have to understand that because the first result on Google will be somebody else that's running that server for them that puts together a really great guide.
That would be me.
And then you're going to have dickheads like this. And
I don't mean I'll be running the server. I'll be just clicking the first link of someone that is running the server. I don't think I've ever met a game that I loved enough that I thought to myself, you know what, I'm going to recode this game so that it works now. I don't see myself doing that.
The thing is, even though you're going to have dickheads like this, in my opinion, they're going to wind up being the minority and they're not really going to destroy the reputation of your company. I have a lot of people that call me that are dicks like that. And it's a very, very small percentage of them that are actually petty enough to leave reviews, because most of the time when you have people that are that petty, they know they're being petty. They know they're being assholes in their head and they feel some sorts of shame about it. Even though they're acting on their emotions when they call you, but they know they're being assholes, so they don't leave a review. And then there are a few of them that do, but even though I have to deal with a lot of assholes like that, 4.9 stars, 1,700 reviews, even before YouTube. Archive.org it, you'll see. 2 years before I started my YouTube channel, piled up of 5-star reviews. The initiative should address live service games that are designed to be massively multiplayer versus games with both campaign and multiplayer modes, where even the single player mode gets shut down. Personally, I would want this to apply across the board, but I could understand if it only applied to games where it was not sold this way. You have games that are sold as services, and then you have games that are sold as games. And I think that the initiative actually does make a good argument as to how it is this could already be separated. There's one particular word that is really important to me. We wish to...
This might be an unpopular opinion, and I think a lot of people might disagree with me, but at what point are we offloading the responsibility of holding companies accountable to politicians because we're too spineless to hold companies accountable? Because it feels like there is a pretty easy solution to this problem. You punish Ubisoft by simply refusing to buy their games until they clean up their image, right? Until they clean up their act. But instead, what we're saying is, no, actually, you know what? I won't do that. I want to continue to buy every single game that Ubisoft produces. And I want the government to fix the problem of Ubisoft being giant dickheads and wanting to remove access to video games. Can a normal human hold big companies responsible? Reckon it sounds silly, right? But if enough of us decided to not buy Ubisoft games, Ubisoft has one of two options: close down or fix your shit. So the question, how can one person hold a corporation accountable? It starts with the one person being you, the person that's watching this video right now, saying, I will no longer support this company until they fix their shit. And if enough people realize that the answer lies in being principled, I'll give you a great example of how I am doing that for myself. And I know that currently I'm making very little dent in this, but for me, it's a principled issue. World of Warcraft's next expansion is coming out very, very soon. The game has a 3-day late access for anyone that doesn't pay more than the box price for the game. I refuse to pay more than the box price for the game, and so I will be playing 3 days late. Would I love to play on the launch day? Sure. But I refuse to play the game of early access being offered to people who are willing to pay more for a video game. And so I take the L on that, and I just play 3 days late because I don't agree with that practice. I don't think that should be a practice that exists. I think early access at its core is a pretty scumbag move because it's not early access, it's late access is what it is. I think it's especially egregious when you offer early access on the higher tier of the game rather just on pre-orders, because it used to be, just a few years ago, early access would be attached to pre-orders. So anyone who pre-orders the game gets the game 3 days early. Now, it's like, no. If you're the poor people, if you're one of the peasants, and you just buy the $70 game, you don't get early access. You have to buy one of the digital deluxe editions so that you can get early access. The second that became a thing, like if it was just early access for pre-purchasing the game, I pre-ordered the game already, it doesn't even fucking matter. But the fact is that the fact that it's now charged on a higher one is just like, nope. I will not fucking support that.
Invoke Article 17, squiggly shit 1 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, gobbledygook here. No one may be deprived of his or her possessions, except in the public interest and in the cases under the condition provided for by law, subject to fair compensation, being paid in good time for their loss. This practice deprives European citizens of their property by making it so that they effectively lose access to their product in an indeterminate, arbitrary amount of time after the point of sale. We wish to see this remedied at the core of this initiative. It says possession, so that really does go there to how was this sold. Something like The Crew, that is...
What was their response, Holy?
sold to me as a possession. It's not sold to me as a service. Now, it functions as a live service game, but simply because it has functions of a live service game does not mean that I'm going to refer to it that way. There are games that have the functionality of live service games that are sold as a possession, and then there are games that have the functionality of a live service game that are sold as a live service game. These are two very, very different things, and I think that's important. So one of the things that I went over in a video that I did a while ago was how Sony was selling things with their terms of service. They had said, here's all the stuff that's going to be removed from your library even though you purchased it. They did change their mind after a lot of consumer backlash, but there were a lot of items where they said that what you had bought and paid for was gone. Use of the terms own, ownership, purchase, sale, sold, rent, or buy in this agreement, or in connection with PSN content does not imply or mean transfer of ownership of any content data. Okay, so again, the intellectual property is not transferred. That makes sense. All content provided is licensed on a non-exclusive and revocable basis to you for personal, private, non-transferable, non-commercial, limited.
No, but holy, that is not an argument. So that's not a good response. Like, how is that a good response? Yeah, we gave you too much, so we just decided, we have to offer early access as well, because otherwise, why would be that's not a good response. That is a lazy fucking response. That is a super lazy response. And if you think Blizzard isn't going to do it again, just wait.
Limited use. Here, they are actually trying to take the word purchase and just pretend that it means something it doesn't. If you have a live service game where you say, this is a service that you are subscribing to, that is different from calling it a purchase. And my problem primarily with all of this has been when somebody calls something a purchase when it is not. You cannot use a contract to redefine the word purchase. If you call something purchase, but you have the ability to take it away from me, that is a rental or that is a lease. Do not call it something it is not, and do not use contracts to define it as something it is not. Now, you may...
Do you think live service games should be forced to change all buy buttons to rent buttons? Because I think that solves a lot of the problem almost right there. Instead of saying buy now, it has to say rent now, because technically that is what you're doing. You're renting the thing. You're not buying it. It's not yours. It's someone else's. Because you are buying it, you're buying temporary rights over it. Abaddon, not in this case that he's talking about. Remember, the case here has changed. We're not talking about the games like World of Warcraft, for example, where you're buying the license to be able to play the game. He's talking about single-player live service games where technically you're not just buying the license to access the game. You are technically buying the game. Ubisoft can't ban you from Assassin's Creed because you're not playing with anyone else, and there would be no reason for them to ban you. And yet it's still a live service game, so you can lose access to the game when they close the servers. Or we need to come up with a whole new word for whatever the fuck that is. This is a case where semantics matter the most. The difference between buy and rent is vast. I do worry that one day this will go from digital products to physical ones. One day? What exactly do you mean one day? Have you not heard of Logitech, bro? Like, it's already there. Logitech has literally put out a post saying that they are working on the Forever mouse. It is a mouse that you don't buy, you pay a subscription for it. And the mouse is yours as long as you pay $9.99 a month. So it is coming, bro, faster than you might fucking think.
I think as a result of this, everybody's just going to call it a purchase of a revocable license. In the US, you could probably get away with that shit. In the EU, they do have clauses regarding misleading terms in contracts, so I don't believe in the EU you'd be able to get away with that. If you were saying that what you're buying is a fucking game, you're purchasing a game, in that case, they're not going to be able to get around this. They're not going to be able to do some sneaky shit that they probably could in the US. But if you're calling it a live service game, you're probably fine. Wouldn't be caught up in the blanket of this. A possession is something you own. A subscription is not something that you own. A live service is not something you own. So as long as it's advertised honestly, you don't have a problem with it. If your game is not advertised properly, then there is a serious problem with it. The consumer needs the ability to make an informed decision. And if you're selling it as something that can go away at any given time, or you're selling it saying, on October 7th, 2025, this game will never work again, fine.
It needs to say it.
But if you don't have that in the terms, and it's not obvious to the customer when they're buying it,
Apple.
that's where it's screwed up. And Thor said, this is essentially paraphrasing, this is shitting on the developer's desk, then telling the developer they have the problem of all the shit that was placed on their desk. I don't like when somebody else just shits on my desk either. This is why this initiative came up in the first place. The reason this became an initiative is because so many companies were shitting on their consumer's desk by saying, I know that you bought a game, not a service, but we're going to take it away from you. When you've had millions of people that have had their desk shit on, I don't think that they're shitting on the developer's desk. I think from the perspective of that gamer that bought that game that no longer works, what they're doing is they're taking the shit off of their desk and they're shoveling it onto the developer and publisher where it belongs. People are sick and tired of shit like Destiny 2, Titanfall, Division, and just many others that screw you over when it comes to your ability to actually play those games. There are games that were able to be transitioned to something that you could run a server for from an online-only game. Gran Turismo Sport, Knockout City, Mega Man, Marvel Avengers, Estonia, City of Heroes. There are a lot of games where people were able to take this from an online-only, and once it was not supported anymore, transition it into a game that you could play without having to connect to the internet. I think that you do have to take these gentlemen's considerations seriously. Like, to look at this dude straight in the face and just say, F you, I'm not going to, like, there's nothing that you've said is reasonable. I'm not going to engage at all. You're an asshole simply because you disagree with what I said. I don't think that that's the way real activism works, and I don't think that actually gets anything done. I do think that you have to engage with a lot of his points, and you really do have to dig into all these details. And the thing is, I want to learn. With Apple and Right to Repair, I would love the real reason. When they say your privacy is at risk or your security is at risk if Lewis can get access to a charging chip, that's bullshit. I don't have the ability to engage when it in that manner, even though I would absolutely love to, because the manufacturer is completely full of shit and they're not acting in good faith. Here, even though this man likely disagrees with me on a number of things ideologically and doesn't like the initiative and is very strong in the criticism of the initiative, that doesn't mean that he's fundamentally lying. He's not paying for a lobbyist to say that magtrometers and microwaves will explode. He's not paying a lobbyist to say that when I change a fuse in a motherboard or when I run a wire, that I'm changing a MacBook into a PC and misrepresenting it to my customer as if it's still a MacBook, which is fraud. The level to which Apple and other manufacturers lie and gaslight politicians and users and their customers to try and trick them into accepting that which they should not accept is insane and completely different from what he's.
Abaddon, I think you and Kiki basically probably have the right of it there. And I think the biggest issue in the world today is that most people don't consider that you don't know what you don't know, right? This entire issue, on the surface, I think sounds very straightforward, especially at the start, right? Before we dove into how many fucking videos, right? It sounds like a very straightforward issue. What would possibly be the problem here? But once you start digging into it and once you start really diving down into it, you start realizing, hold on, this is not an easy topic. There's no easy fix here. And even discussing the issue isn't as easy as people might think it to be. It's just interesting that on the internet, people decide what to believe oftentimes long before they even know the extent of what is happening, right? That always blows my mind.
He's doing. He disagrees. He doesn't like the idea ideologically, in my opinion, and he's poking holes in certain elements that were not fully fleshed out as a result of this being an initiative, not a draft bill, or even if it was a draft bill, you're supposed to poke holes in it. It's not a full bill, but he has ideas on it. And all these people need to be at the table in order to come up with something that makes sense. You do have to consider where they're coming from. You can't just have this oversimplified thing of just don't limit it. You have to understand the way modern infrastructure works. You have to understand the way these games are developed. Am I saying that I changed my mind on any of these things? No, but you still have to dig into the weeds so that you can write legislation that doesn't suck. When he says stuff like politicians don't really understand gaming, it's not just politicians. The industry lobbyists that are lobbying on behalf of the video game developers against stuff like this. don't understand anything.
Of the game console to protect their safeguards against sophisticated theft or piracy, to help the piracy video game software.
The piracy video game software?
To help the piracy video game software.
Do you at least read this into the mirror the night before you show up and testify in front of the committee? Or do you just write this on the bus on the way to the legislative building the same way that I did my earth science homework in 8th grade?
Software and hardware have security features that are built into them, and they're known as technical protection measures or digital locks. These locks prevent the play of any unauthorized game. Put simply, if a video game console's firmware runs a verification check on a game and it is not a legitimate copy, the video game won't play the console.
Wait, did she just say the video game won't play the console? I would fucking hope not. Like, that would be very awkward for pretty much everyone involved when my video game suddenly started playing my fucking console. That would definitely not be as intended. Holy shit. All right.
The video game won't play the console.
No, but seriously, my favorite part of this is how the lobbyist that's sitting next to her, when she says that the video game will play the console, it's like, oh yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. The video game will play the console. The piracy data, lithium-ion battery, latest security will explode. It's been almost 5 years since I did that video, and every time I hear it, I want to bang my head against the wall.
Yep.
Can you blame me? Anyway, that's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye now. And if any of you want to talk, by all means, I would love to talk to this dude Thor. I'd love to have go back and forth with Ross Scott on a live stream. I think it would be fun. We could all learn something. It doesn't have to be this adversarial throwing shit at each other thing.
Welcome to the internet, bro. You're dealing in the gaming space now. This isn't Apple right to repair where you're dealing with the suits at Apple. Here we fling shit and ask questions later.